Welcome to Extracurricular. I'm Eddie Geller.
Your co-host.
Oh, well, I thought maybe just introducing myself with my name, and then you could say your name. We're still at the beginning. This is only, I think, episode 12. We're still figuring this out.
I feel as though there's a script, and I was thrown off. I am Stephanie Vanos, your other co-host, and I am here, as I always am, unofficially, though I am also on the Orange County School Board. Do you want to start over?
No, I don't want to start over. Do you feel like we can't deviate at all?
I'm not saying we can't deviate. I guess I was just expecting, because I feel like you like to kind of follow the same pattern.
No,
for this.
Okay, that's fair enough. Do you think I'm boring? Do you think like in regular life I'm boring?
I don't know how this got turned around on me. You were most definitely not boring.
Thank you. Neither are you. I think you're incredibly interesting. You know what else was interesting?
Please tell me.
Our conversation today with Chris Mitchell.
Oh my gosh. This was a really, really, really good one.
So who is Chris Mitchell for folks who don't know?
So Chris Mitchell he's the founder of Statecraft Media. And he helps candidates kind of craft their messaging, communicate, and really just communicate with voters. But he's been involved with Democratic politics for over 20 years, really in Central Florida, in Hillsborough County, Polk County, Orange County. And all in all, he's just a really nice guy and really thoughtful. And, I say I joke with him all the time, but it's really not a joke. Getting involved in the political world, there are people who are nice and you can talk to. But I wouldn't say I have a real true connection with a lot of them because I find a lot of them to maybe just not be the most authentic people.
Do you want to name names?
I'm not going to name names, but Chris was one of those people who I really appreciated from the beginning and disclosure, like he did help me on my campaign but yeah, it was just a really good conversation. He's
a really lovely guy and had some really smart thoughts about just running for office in general because he works with a lot of candidates, but he's also, a Democratic Party insider here in Florida. So we got his takes on David Jolly, repeated topic of this show. Because you and we met David Jolly. We were at an event. We'll talk. You'll hear more about it in that conversation. And then we had some, conversations about national politics, Democratic politics.
And education, which I really appreciated. We went back and forth a little bit. He pushed back on some things, and I appreciated that. I love those conversations. That are just real and really reflect what I think a lot of people are thinking. Yeah, no,
I thought it was really good, and we pitched a run for you for another office. But again, we'll let folks get to that. You're laughing at me, but no, I thought it was a great conversation. By the way, if you are new to the Extracurricular podcast, please do subscribe, rate us 5 stars. All the stars, please. And we are now on Instagram as extracurricular_podcast. So you find us on Instagram, follow us there. We're going to be posting, we did some video clips from our last interview with Senator Carlos Guillermo Smith. We're going to do more video clips in the future. People like video on their phones. So not just in people's ears, but in front of their eyeballs. We're going for all the senses here.
We are, and I love it. I'm here for it. I don't really know how to do any of it, but I appreciate your expertise.
That's happy to help, happy to be here. And you're still watching the email inbox like a hawk, right?
Oh, am I ever?
Podcast extracurricular@gmail.com if you have any comments or questions. Steph loves opening an email inbox. One of your favorite activities.
One of my favorites.
Speaking of activities, I feel like it's been quiet on the school board front. Do you still work at the school board? Are you still there?
I feel as though I'm being called out. No, actually, so I was fortunate to be able to take some time. District offices were closed for 4th of July, of course.
That's what it was.
And then, just back this week. And I think a lot of what we're working on now, because we got budget numbers so late this year, and then we also have news of the federal funding that is not trickling down, that we were expected to get, and we are now looking like not getting it. Just a lot of kind of behind the scenes. Okay, what are we doing? What is the budget looking like? And we have our first budget meeting at the end of the month. So there have been things going on, but we did not have we have have just one meeting this month. However, there's also a State Board of Education meeting coming up this Wednesday, the 16th.
Here in Orlando.
The Rosen Creek, one of the Rosens. So that's kind of happening as well. So yeah, things are starting to pick up again.
You going to go there and pick a fight?
I'm not going to go pick a fight, but I am going, well, who knows? What happens, happens. I am planning to attend.
That is the mantra of the podcast. What happens, happens. No, I know you're always very busy. But yeah, I mean, it's summertime, school is out. So
well, what about you though? What were you up to? Did you do anything last night?
It's almost like you're setting me up. No, I had an improv show last night in Tampa. Where were you, by the way?
I was here eating at Thai House and watching The Wild Robot, which was a great movie, and watched with my daughter and really enjoyed it. There were some tears, but it was good.
That sounds so lovely. No, I did a show last night. A lot of fun. So for folks who don't know, which I don't know why anyone would know, I perform at this comedy venue in Tampa. I go back over there once a month to perform at the Commodore Theater. Love that theater. Performed a lot there when I was in Tampa. There's a show they do every second Friday of every month called Salute and Happy Days, which is a reference to something very Tampa specific. But it was a fun show last night. So what happens is we'll have someone come up there and tell some stories, some real life stories, and then we do improv scenes based off those stories. And so I had a really fun storyteller last night, and he told the story doing some movie production stuff, how he had painted this pentangle, the sign of the devil, on the floor of a building for a movie. And so we did some scenes in which Satan appeared. But I just want to be clear, I am anti-Satan. I don't believe in Satan, but I'm against what Satan represents, and I want to make that clear on this podcast in case there were any questions.
As there could be. I mean, you better check the email because you might see some questions there. But I have to say, Salute and Happy Days, I love watching this show. And I just love the Commodore Theater. I just appreciate everything they stand for and what they're doing. And more people should go watch shows there.
Well, go to the Commodore Theater if you live in the Tampa Bay area.
Or even if you don't.
Or if you don't, make a trip. I mean, let us know if you want to go see a show at the Commodore. Email us at podcast extracurricular. I will buy you a ticket or make sure you get in for free. That's how much I love that theater. And we're going to have a couple of owners of the theater on at some point on the podcast to talk to them. So thank you for bringing that up. Is there anything else from this week? Maybe, do you have any bones to pick with any certain corporations?
I'm just going to say that I was maybe like not having the best afternoon. And that late afternoon, kind of
early
a few
evening,
days ago, I had to run some errands, grab some things at Target. I can't keep up with Target. Is it good? Is it bad? I don't know. But
there's no ethical consumption under capitalism.
I had to pick up a few things at Target, which I did. And I got in the self-checkout lane because though there are 20 checkout aisles, only one of them has someone working there.
I can see your anger building as we talk. The fumes are emanating, but
so
keep going.
So they force you in self-checkout, which is not, I'm old. I don't want to do self-checkout. I know all the young people do. I do not. I just want to have someone check me out. Not check me out in that way, but check whatever. Anyway, so
this is the most, we just did the interview with Chris and talked about all of these Republican shenanigans that are going on. This is the angriest I've seen you today.
Well, so I go check out in my forced line and I click my items. Okay, kind of fun. You put them in the bag and then I go to pay. And they won't let me use my red card. Y'all, you get 5% off when you use the red card. And so they won't let me use the red card. And so I flag the person. It's very nice. She comes over and she's like, oh yeah, well it's not working. You can't use your red card in self-checkout. What a scam this is. That is, so I'm like, okay, well, if I can't use the red card, that's fine. But then can I still get the 5% off? Oh, well, I can't do that. You have to go to the help desk to get the 5% off. I mean, does this make anyone else? This made me so mad that they would do this and that magically the red card's not working. So magically you can't get the 5% off. And then it's kind of like the Medicaid thing where they add in the extra burdensome, paperwork to make you not take advantage of things. And I know it's not the same, but it's like that concept of let's just make it hard to give you what you are eligible for, but we're just going to make it so hard that you're not going to do it.
I was laughing, but that's actually an incredibly astute observation. And you're totally right. And it is, you make it more burdensome. It makes it harder for people to use things that they are entitled to. And in this case, you were entitled to that 5% off. And we walked out of Target. You did not get that 5% off. You will never see that 5% off again.
I mean, I might not go to Target again because of this. I'm angry.
I'm sorry I got you riled up again.
Are you?
Yeah.
I don't think you are, but that's okay.
Well, we'll leave it there. Thank you for talking. I feel like it was good that you talked about that again. I mean, I'm not your therapist. You actually have a professional qualified therapist, but I do feel it was good for you to talk to and express those emotions about Target. And I hope Target's listening and improves their process.
There you go. We can always hope.
Yeah, no, please throw us to the interview.
No, I was just going to say, let's get to the interview. It was so fun, so great. Please enjoy our interview with Chris Mitchell.
It's so good. Enjoy.
Welcome to Extracurricular. We have a special guest here today, Chris Mitchell, who is the founder of Statecraft Media. I have to say, Chris helped me on my campaign, and I still don't really understand what you do. So I'm just going to say I'm so happy to have you here. You know, you meet so many people in the political world who, you like, but maybe don't really like. And Chris is one of those people that I truly do like in this political world. And so I'm so happy that you're here. So grateful you're here. And yeah, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and what you do at Statecraft Media?
Well, I'm excited to be here. I'm a fan of the pod.
Mm-hmm.
So, I've watched or listened to a lot of your episodes. It's kind of also awkward that I'm following a series of generational talent. So I hope not to disappoint. But yeah, you're
doing great so far.
Well, let's hold on. It's only the first 30 seconds here. My kind of how I got into politics, I was it's always been around as long as I can remember, kind of me really interested. And one of my core memories is back in third grade, I went up to my third grade teacher who was supporting Bush. Mm-hmm. And I was had this breaking news to let her know that, Clinton had beat him, and she just looked at me and was like, I don't live in a cave. Go back to your desk. And I remember that, right? So it's always been there. I watched.
You were like a young Aaron Parnas.
Yeah.
Breaking news.
Breaking news. So I watched State of Unions, all that kind of stuff. And then I really got it kicked up in gear when I went to college and, volunteered for the Kerry campaign and kind of got involved there locally, knew some people. And then, this guy, you might have heard of him, young, black senator from Illinois with a funny name, came along and kind of really, lit a fire that this is something I really, really passionate about, and you can see the impact that politics can make, good or positive, on people's lives. And then, so I got involved in the party. I became the chair of Hillsborough County Democratic Party at 26.
Damn.
Kind of just, faked it till I made it, right, basically at that point. So I give a lot of kudos to Sam Well, who I'm a huge fan of. And
the chair of the Orange County Party.
Yeah, doing a lot of amazing work, and he's got a very bright future ahead of him. So, and so did that for a while, then went on later to for a small stint to be the political director for the House caucus. After that, I did some consulting, and then kind of the next big trigger point for me in my life was I found out I was going to be a dad. And I was like, what are you doing with your life, Chris? So I knew I had a small window at that point I always wanted to start my own firm, and I wanted to, start my own business, and I knew I had a window. Right. Yeah. And I also wanted to make sure I had provided an opportunity for my son, as well as try to make a difference on the margins. And I don't have this, idea. I'm not going to out here change the world, but I can make a difference on the margins, especially working with amazing candidates like, Stephanie and whatnot. But, I think that was the goal. And, 7 years later, over 300 campaigns, 20 states, it's kind of crazy where we are right now. So.
That's incredible. And for folks, I think listening, I think of you a few ways, but a Democratic Party insider here in Florida. Do you think that's fair to say?
That's fair to say. I guess at this point, I mean, the older I get, the more I'm like part of the machine, and I'm like, this doesn't feel comfortable.
Well, let me since we're kind of talking about your work. You know, you work at this, or you started this firm, run this firm, Statecraft. Do you consider yourself a political consultant?
Reluctantly, yes. I am a political consultant. You know, I think that there is a negative connotation to that word, rightfully so in some aspects. Yeah. Right. I think I understand the rap. You know, I've been outspoken, I feel, on a lot of things this year, and one of those was obviously kind of our roles in this process, and making sure that, you know, we are not abusing the system. Yeah. Which, yeah, you know, I think a lot of consultants, you know, try to be the smartest person in the room, but at the same time, some of these consultants don't actually win races. Yeah. And so there's a trade-off to that as well.
So is that how we should judge consultants, whether they win races?
I mean, you're an attorney. Would you ever hire an attorney that hasn't won a single case in court?
Well, I'm not saying not win a single case, but I'm saying, is that the only metric that we should judge consultants?
No, I think in all fairness, I think it's always I think you bring up a good point. I think this win-loss aspect is kind of not in the full context. I work in Florida politics a lot. The races that we run here, they're very difficult races, right? And I think that you have to look at how candidates are performing, our consultants, pushing the envelope, and being creative and innovative over performing how the district should be. I think, I say this often, I say, I think the calculus of any political campaign, I would say 80% is environment and timing, right? The political environment and timing dictate 80% of the outcome. I would say the other 10, 15% is having a very dynamic candidate that resonates with the district they're running in and that can connect with the voter. The other 5% is what I do, right?
Which is what?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Maybe by the end of this pod, we'll figure out what I do, right?
It's very important.
Yes. But I think that's kind of the calculus of, getting to that 50+1, right? And I help kind of navigate and as working together in your race for school board, there's the tactics, there's the comms, but a lot of it is also, helping the candidate navigate the space, right? It can be very daunting, challenging, not just to the candidate, but to the people in their orbit, right? It can be a very taxing situation. And so I often say this and joke that really the last 2 weeks of a campaign, I'm more therapist than consultant at that point, So
I was going to say, that was such a big piece of it is just, I don't know. One thing I really appreciated about working with you was I think we had like a 90-minute, maybe I'm exaggerating because talking about myself made it seem like it was 3 times as long, but like a 90-minute interview of, okay, tell me about you. And what makes you excited to get up in the morning? Things that aren't just about, what's on your campaign page, but is about like you as a person and like what's authentic to you as a person. And I really appreciated that. That's how we started that relationship, was having this long, in-depth conversation about like who I was and what made me tick. I so appreciated your work and our relationship.
Well, I appreciate that. And you were obviously very easy to work with on that front. Because I think you were very authentic to who you are, right? And I think that's important. One of my biggest jobs is I'm a storyteller, right? This might be a newsflash for your pod listeners, but people don't vote logically, right? They don't really vote on a lot of factual basis. The majority of people, if not all, at some level, vote with emotion, right? And so I have to tell a compelling story that represents your values that in a way that connects with the voters that they want to support you. And that is, I think, a very important element in what I do. And I don't think that all consultants or all campaign folks really look at it that way. They get so rigid in the polling and the numbers and those are all important aspects to what we do, but it's one element. And I'm a lot better at my job when I have an amazing candidate to work with, right? And so I think that's an important aspect of what we do as consultants.
There's so many things that I'm thinking about as I'm listening and watching you two have this conversation. One is this is not sponsored content. You two genuinely have a lot of have a lot of admiration for each other, and I appreciate that. I'm such a fan. All three of us at this table have run for office. One of us has won. Congratulations.
Good job,
Steph.
Must have had a great consultant.
But I always want people who are thinking about running for office to consider it. And I want people to run because we need great candidates, and we can talk more about that. But maybe a couple things I want to prompt for you is like, why you've obviously talked about the storytelling aspect, but very like nitty gritty, like, why does a candidate, someone who's running for office, need a consultant? Or like, why do you need a team? Tell us more about that.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I think, a lot of times folks that want to be a candidate for office come at it from a direction of like, I feel like I can do better than the person that's here.
Totally.
Or they've watched too much cable TV and they got sick of it, right? They're like, I can do this, right? And they come from fields that, are not in the day-to-day aspects of running a political campaign, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think, in anything in life, if I'll go back to an attorney, if I want to buy a house or if I'm in legal trouble, like, I want someone that knows this, navigates this space on a day-to-day basis, or an expert in that. And I think the other thing too is that makes a really good candidate is once they put their team together, they actually trust their team, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. And that doesn't mean that there's not room for conversation or disagreement. I know Stephanie and I, we had a lot of conversations, especially around, if I can say like, tactics as it comes to contrast messaging or negative messaging, right? But at the end of the day, I felt like I was batting above 80% in the conversation, right? And so I think once you put that together, you have to really trust the team you put in. And I think, there's an element to really, you can tell how a candidate's going to be as an elected official mm-hmm. by the way they kind of approach the campaign itself behind the scenes as well. That's one of my takeaways there. But, I think it's important to have a team of folks that have seen every angle to mm-hmm. this. Yeah. Because I think, like I said, I wasn't really joking when I said really the last 2 weeks of a campaign, I'm more therapist than consultant because you're helping them navigate. You've been there, right?
I'm glad you weren't joking because I tell the jokes on this podcast.
That's
so thank you.
There's a lot of calmingness. I would say this, starting the firm and the amount of campaigns I've run it or been a part of at this point, when you get into September, October, for me, it's almost a very calming mm-hmm. environment where, someone first-time candidate, that is the most chaotic time for them, right? And so I think that right there, the calmness, being able to kind of see the playing field as it really is and be able to communicate that, you just don't trying to get up one day, I want to run for public office and I'm also going to run my campaign. That's usually a recipe for absolute disaster.
So much,
yeah. So.
Okay. Well, I also want to just mention, we've talked about it, I think, from like a 30,000 foot level of what you do, but what is the actual thing that a firm like yours makes? Like, because one of the things a lot of people who run for office, one of the first conversations they're going to have with someone who's a consultant or whatever is going to be like, how much money can you raise? Yeah. And to go through a term we know well here in the political world is your Rolodex, mm-hmm. which is, I think, absolutely like the most off-putting part of deciding or looking into running for office is knowing you're going to have to ask people for money. And it is we've talked a little bit about it on this podcast. I think it's the most distasteful part of it. And we should have publicly funded elections, et cetera, et cetera. But can you talk about like why campaigns are so expensive, why candidates are asked to like go to their Rolodex and ask for money and like what that money is spent on?
That's a lot of questions in one. I will say, once you get past what makes a great candidate from the being authentic side and have a compelling story to tell, it's the second question, which I'll be honest, typically it's the first question.
You're right.
Can you raise the money
Yeah.
to be able to be successful? This is a multi-billion-dollar industry. The presidential campaign alone was $1 billion adventure, right?
Steph, how many billions did you raise?
0 billions.
0 billions. There was a few zeros, but not billions. But I think you have to be able to effectively communicate to voters in a very crowded space, right? People's attention spans are very limited. Being able to communicate very nuanced issues in a compelling way to make them digestible is difficult, and you need repetition. You need to be able to engage them where they are actually consuming their information. And so, I started our firm as a digital agency, right? And we've now moved into other aspects of what we do, but I started as a digital agency because I felt that was really where we were heading. All three of us have our phones on the table right now, right? So like where people are engaging in their content, not just social media, but now streaming, text messaging, and how people are getting there. And so it takes repetition. Some of these platforms, depending on what they are not cheap or not expensive, right? Or not cheap. They can be quite expensive, especially the more traditional elements. So like direct mail and linear TV, those are more expensive, but they also have their place in the tactics, right? Yeah. And so, just with any marketing or communication, there's going to be a cost to it.
I think that's one of the things when I ran for office, one of the misconceptions I had is like, oh, if I'm the best candidate in the field and I have good ideas and I'm dynamic and creative, which are things I thought I was, like I can win this race. But
let's back up for a second, okay? You went viral, bro, okay? You were able to raise resources because you were just a genius when it came to going viral. I still remember that.
That's very kind.
He did it the easy way.
No, I disagree. I feel free to share this now. Yeah. My campaign launch video got a lot of attention. Yeah. Raised almost no money.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I raised so much money because I was a relentless call time fiend. Like I just annoyed the hell out of my friends and family, anyone who's a friend of.
Well, I'm glad we could correct that record on the pod. Right here, so.
No, I mean, I spent so much time on the phone calling.
Because you love call time.
I love call time. I love calling people and asking them for money. But thank you for your kind words, and I do appreciate that. But I guess what I wanted to get to is like, people just have to know your name, and enough people. Like not enough people knew who I was, and that's on me for reasons we don't have to go into, but like people just have to recognize your name when they get to the ballot box. And I think that can't be understated. Like be a great candidate, have great ideas, be dynamic, but like people got to know your name, and that costs money.
But it's more nuanced than that, though. Okay. And what I mean by that is people are very subconscious. Like when you go in, we've all voted countless elections. Some of these ballots are 4 pages, 5 pages, right? And so, Stephanie, you were probably mid-pack or midway down the second page, right?
I was the last one.
Yeah.
School board with a V. Like I was the last.
You're always first page in my heart. Okay, I just want you to.
I appreciate
That's
that.
so sweet.
But yes, like I was at the bottom.
And so you have to, whether you're consciously or subconsciously, you have to create an emotional connection. Whether they consciously register that they like Stephanie or not, there's going to be this emotional reaction when they see the name, right? And that's all you want, a half second. That is why, and we had long conversations, that is why negative advertising works, right? Because we are, as humans, trained to remember the flight and fight, the negative things, that will kill you, right? We are trained to remember those things. So that's why negative reinforcement on a particular candidate, it works in the opposite way. So your opponent, I just don't feel like I like that person, I'm going to vote for than the other one, right? And so there's a lot of psychology to this, right? So when we talk about name recognition, and then the following question is, positive ID name, or is it negative ID name, right? And so there's an element to that. And all that's done is by reinforcement of communication, right? Whether people are consciously, doing it or not. One of the challenges right now in our space is people can be watching the streaming, but they can also be second devicing at the same time, right? And so how do you cut through the news? So a lot of times when we're doing video ads, the actual audio track is as important to me as the visuals.
Yeah.
Because they might not be looking at the visuals. They might be head down, but they can hear it, right? And so subconsciously, you're still processing the information. So this is why it's expensive.
Yeah. And I'm laughing because like that's so smart and obviously like you're good at what you do, but it is like it also makes me sad for society. And I'm reflecting upon myself who second screens all the time. Okay, I want to apologize, Steph, because I know I've been monopolizing questions, but I do have one more because I'm trying to think about always be in the mindset of people who are listening.
Yeah.
And this is like, I'm going to ask you like kind of a broad question. Have we come to the full pollution saturation point of email and text? I'm sure many listeners are like, another fucking text, another email. How do you balance that? And I'm sure you understand how people feel. And also this is your work and you got to communicate.
Yeah. I used to make this joke where, Facebook could close up shop tomorrow and I wouldn't lose one night of sleep, right? Because people are going to find a way to consume information and to communicate with one another. And so to answer your question is when it stops working, we'll stop using it, right? So people can bitch about their emails they get or their text messages, but they still check them.
Yeah.
Right. Of course, and so
Steph is like, not me.
Yeah. So
I mean, my work emails I check. Just like my work emails I check. If you send it to my Gmail, probably not going to read it. Honestly, but yeah.
Well, email has become less effective, but it's still effective enough that it pays for itself, right? And so, that's my simple, straightforward answer. When it stops being effective, we will stop doing it.
Well, and I have to say, I know what you do is effective, and I think I told you the story. My sister, I was mentioning to my sister that I was looking for a bike for one of my girls, and she was on Facebook Marketplace, and she found a bike, and she said, "Oh, Stephanie, you should go." She's like, "I've told them you're interested. You're going to come pick it up." So I hadn't communicated with this person on Facebook, but my sister gives me the address. So I drive up the other side of it's actually the very other end of my district, drive up there, knock on the door. The person answers and she looks at me and she goes, Are you Stephanie Vanis who's running for school board? Like, I had no idea. And it's only because she's like, I saw something. She's like, I don't even remember what it was, something on my phone. And then you looked like that person. So good job, Chris. So
there
thank
you go. See, it works.
It works.
It does.
Cross-channel, cross-platform. People don't, it goes back to the point I made earlier. People don't maybe consciously register it, but they register it, right? And so you have to be effective. A lot of this is also, of course, psychology, right? And kind of how people process information, how they make decisions. It's very primal. I know when, and I think that's also very frustrating for candidates and elected officials, especially those who are that more cerebral and policy driven, right? It can be very frustrating. I'm sure public comment, I'm not speaking for anybody here, but I'm sure public comment can be frustrating because sometimes people get up and they just don't understand the nuance and the context of everything going on. And that's very frustrating.
Well, I know Steph loves every public comment that is ever made.
That's what she's told me.
Yeah,
she's like, I love public comment.
I actually love public comment. I mean, there might be other parts that run a little long, but I do like public comment. Okay, so moving on, wanted to talk about some statewide politics. Earlier this week, Eddie and I had a chance to go to an event and meet David Jolly, who is running for governor for the state of Florida in 2026.
I've heard.
I know you've heard because you've had quite a few things, some things to say about this. So just kind of wanted to throw it to you. What is your take? You've been around, you've been involved in politics, deeply involved in politics for a while, Florida politics. And what do you think about that?
Well, I have a lot of thoughts on David Jolly. And I just want to be very clear from the onset. It's not so much about David. It's really about who we are as a party and what we're trying to do in the state. I think it's no secret at this point, the Democratic Party in Florida is in complete disarray. And that's not a reflection on the current leadership or any of that. That is just the fact that we have not been in control in any meaningful way in over 30 years, right? And I just want to cut in for just a sec. For anyone who doesn't know, David Jolly, former Republican member of Congress who represented Florida's 13th district, I believe. So he is newly a Democrat as of, I believe, this year. So, and an MSNBC commentator. So I just want to give a little context for anyone who might not understand that part. Thanks for that lead-in, because I think it's important from a standpoint of he announced he was going to run for governor in early June. I think he announced he was going to be a Democrat a few months before that. Welcome to the team. But I don't. At the same time, I don't think they should be carrying the banner, especially someone who. Before I get into that, let me just say something real quick. I am for people evolving.
Yeah.
I grew up in Imperial Polk County, right? And I am the only Democrat in my family, and I have seen folks, their friends and families evolve, especially with Trump, right? But on a lot of core issues, they were not so far hard on what we fight for day in day as Democrats, right? The more the libertarian type Republicans, things of that nature. I think there's a lot of space for that. My problem here is I welcome David Jolly to our party. I think he has he could contribute to what we're trying to do. But I have a strong issue with someone who not just voted, but carried a bill to defund Planned Parenthood. Was not a 6-week abortion ban, a full right abortion national ban that he voted for.
Yeah.
He also voted to remove 40 million Americans from healthcare. Something that I mentioned earlier was really drawn to President Obama's campaign. Healthcare was a cornerstone of that campaign, and I'm very proud of the ACA. Right, as all Democrats we should be. And the list can go on with Mr. Jolly, right? But at some point, you eventually run out of core values that we have as a party that he has not been fighting against his entire life. And I think as a party, we need, and I mentioned this as you referred earlier in a few op-eds of like, how do we build our party and get back to relevancy in this state? And I think it has to be through someone that believes in our core values of who we are as Democrats. You look at a lot of campaigns, elections, you look at the 2018 election with Andrew Gillum and even Gwen, I think those are, Gwen Graham, I think those are examples of people that were on the different political spectrums, but both shared the same core values, right? And they mobilized different aspects of our base. And I think that this strategy of appealing to the middle and even Republicans is a misnomer. And I know David has made this pitch in his speeches. And I think that is a story that we've been telling ourselves for a decade in the state with Governor Chris. And David Jolly in a lot of aspects is a Charlie Chris light, and so I think it's just setting ourselves up for failure. And also I think, how do we really want to build our party back? There's a lot of infrastructure issues that we have to deal with, and you're not going to change who we are as a party without having a dynamic candidate that can energize our base and also at the same time appeal to people that have essentially turned their backs on the Democratic Party. We have a brand issue, right? No doubt about that. And we need someone that's going to come in and help kind of rejuvenate who we are, but at the same time stay true to who our values are as a Democrat. I've always said I will vote for who our nominee is, right? Of course. But that will be a very difficult pill because I think there are some very fundamental values. I will vote for David if he's our nominee. I'll just be blunt, right?
Of course.
Right. He's obviously he's the better alternative to what's on the other side. But it's a hard pill to swallow because the things he's voted for and he's been fighting for, I've spent most of my adult life fighting against. And I think that and I'll leave it here. I think this party deserves a primary. We need to have a healthy debate as Democrats about where we are going as a party. I point to the national level. You have some amazing folks that are considered conservative Democrats. Andy Beshear, right? He won in a red state. But guess what? He never voted or pushed to kick people off healthcare. He never voted to ban access to women's reproductive health care. He's never done these things, right? He's never voted to defund education. None of these things. But yet he's won in red states where there are more Republicans than Democrats, where there is a large group of NPAs. But what he did was he was able to connect with working everyday Kentuckians in that state, was able to build a strong coalition of voters. One of the most important stats that came out of the 24 election for me was that if you look at the Obama coalition, the type of voters that showed up in 2024, if you overlay that on the electorate, they were more of the Obama coalition than they were not. And so in a matter of, 12 years, we've seen that coalition completely break down and peel off. You've had erosion within our own base. You've had voters that voted for Barack Obama twice. Now, support, Trump. They might have went a little back on Biden, but now they went back to Trump, right? And so I think that the coalition is there, but it takes someone kind of making full circle on this conversation that's authentic to who they are. You cannot say to me that David is authentic to who he is. I don't care what story gets up to you, or how many times he wants to talk about his family and try to make that connection. And I'll leave it here. And I know there's other questions, but I'll say this: from my experience, to change a core bedrock principle, it takes something earth-shattering, like something happening to your kid, someone you truly care about, to change a core principle or value. So I have to ask myself, did something like that happen? Or did he never really have that position and he just did it for political expediency 10 years ago, right? For his own party? Because you can't have it both ways, in my opinion.
Yeah. And I think it's something that big and that core deserves an explanation.
100%.
And I feel like we haven't gotten that.
No.
Like why? And it kind of to what you said, why did you change? Explain that, not just, well, I thought one way and now I think something different.
Well, he hasn't had to.
Yeah.
And that's the problem. There's been this baptism. And there's a lot of us that are like, we're not ready for that.
I'm Jewish. I don't know what those are.
Yeah.
We'll talk later.
Yeah. But that's why I think a primary here is going to be very helpful. And if I had to put my money on, I think a candidate maybe that maybe not even have political experience could come along. And I think these are just, I would have a field day. I'm not involved in anything at the moment, but I would have a field day on this because I just think these are just core values of who we are as Democrats.
No, I completely hear that. Let me just play the devil's advocate.
By the way, these are my own opinions. They do not reflect anybody else on this pod.
Okay, no. No, and I want to be, obviously I want to be transparent. Like, we had a nice interaction when we saw him, and he seemed, Steph, interested in talking more with you. And of course, like, you're an elected official, you're fighting for education, you're going to have those conversations, and especially, when he wanted to talk to you. So appreciate that about him. But to play that devil's advocate, people are like, we have to unite around a candidate. We don't want a contentious primary. When you hear those phrases, and I have an allergic reaction to that, especially July, the year before election year. But when you hear people say those things, what's your pushback?
I used to be them.
Yeah.
Be honest. I used to be those folks that we don't need a contentious primary. We need to fall in line. Republicans fall in line, Democrats fall in love. That's the oldest expression, right? And we just need to be able to put the person forward that we think can give us the best opportunity at winning. And I think at the end of the day, I think I've evolved on that because the situation's not the same. Florida's different 10 years ago, right? We need a fundamental generational type change as who we are from our leader standpoint, right? And so, I think that we do need a healthy primary. I think this is the time right now where we should be asking the hard questions. And honestly, I've had this conversation privately with y'all. I think it's not in my best interest to be as vocal as I have been on these issues. And so I just think we are at such a crossroads. 2014, 2016 should have been a wake-up call. 2024 is just an absolute ringing of the last bell.
Yeah.
Right? If we don't get our shit together in the next 2 years, I don't know where the pathway is for our party in some of these states and as a nation. And that's very alarming. So for me, I think there's a lot of hard truths that we have to have, and we're just not having them in local, state, or national levels.
I will say that's one of the things I felt listening to him speak is, he talked a lot about affordability issues, which are important. But I'm also like, we are living in a fascist state where the Attorney General of Florida is threatening Steph with arrest if she doesn't go along with banning books. We're building a detention camp in South Florida. It just feels like and this is not exactly your point, but like, it feels like we're living in this awful, dystopia here in Florida and across the country. But we're not really having that reckoning, and that there's like a disconnect of the reality of what I'm hearing from him and the reality of what I'm feeling in this state.
He's an old school politician that's cosplaying as a Democrat, and that's how it feels. Like, I go back to being authentic. I think a lot of people want to win, and I understand it. Like, Stephanie knows how competitive I am. Right? That's one of the aspects I love about this.
You're one of the few people who know how competitive I am.
Yes. So we shared that. I think we bonded over that. I'm extremely competitive. There's not, like, for me, I probably shouldn't say this, but for me, the ends justify the means, right? Like, my job is to win because I know if I can't get
We're going to clip that part in the podcast. The ends justify the means, Chris Mitchell.
You should lead with that, actually. Because at the end of the day, our values and our principles don't mean shit if I can't get the person in the office, right? And I think nothing's been more clear about that than what just happened with Donald Trump and his administration for the second time around. DeSantis, and let's talk through that. But that is my bigger thing here. Is obviously we want to win, and I think that's where a lot of this comes from. Yeah, and I understand it. Listen, down at Lead Blue, a lot of people that I respect and have great relationships, the first thing they came up to me and said was, "What's your problem with David Jolly?" And I go, two things came in mind. I go, one was, okay, you read the headline, you didn't read the article. Yeah. Right? Because the article wasn't really about David. He was just the catalyst of my comments. Right. And I think getting the personality aside, I think we need to have that real conversation as Democrats about who we are and what are the people that we are lifting up, that, because this isn't like running for, I have high respect for all our legislators out there. This isn't running for state house. He's running to be the governor of our state. Right? The leader of our party. Yeah. That is what happens when you become governor. You are now the de facto leader of the party. Yeah. And so I have some, as I mentioned, some issues with that.
Absolutely. And I think, like we've said many times, this conversation is not about David Jolly in particular, but about what he represents. Yeah. Steph, we've yapped a lot. Any more takes?
Yeah, I just, one thing that I noticed in the conversation with him, and I'll say this, one thing I appreciated about him is, he came up to me afterwards and he shared that he was sort of like learning about the voucher program, wanted to learn more about the taxpayer funded voucher system and how, really destructive it was to public education. And so on the one hand, I really do appreciate someone who wants to learn more. But, I will say this, when I think about his remarks, I remember thinking, wow, he's a really good communicator. But as I reflect back, there's really not that much I can remember about what he said. And I'm contrasting that with Jose Rodriguez, who was running for Attorney General, who also spoke that night. And
love JJ, by the way.
And it's funny because, as he was talking, it's like, I kind of appreciated how he's like getting into policy and like kind of getting into the weeds and almost like couldn't help himself. And I want to be like, no, pull back. But what I remember about him speaking was like, he's a fighter. He believes the Attorney General needs to take a more aggressive stance and needs to fight for things in this state. And like, I remember that from him. And like, that's the emotional connection that I have with him is he's going to be a fighter. He understands what the AG needs to do. He understands the crisis that we're in with this current AG right now. And so, I don't know. I'm just kind of reflecting on, not wanting to like, I appreciate some of the things that David Jolly's bringing, but when I really reflect on what they said, I just felt that connection with JJR.
And I think that is also an excellent observation of what's being discussed now and what I think the party really needs, and that is a fighter. I think you take a look at what's going on in New York City. You had a candidate that was an established brand, right? That was well funded, people knew, versus a candidate that was just, talking about things that really mattered to folks in a way that he was willing, you got the notion he was going to fight for you, right? And whether you like it or not, there's a lot of comparisons that can maybe be made to Trump in that regard, that he would fight for you, that he cared about you. I mean, the mental gymnastics that he was able to do to get people to vote against their own interests, that a billionaire was going to be on your side. Yeah. I mean, say what you want about him. but he's a skilled politician, and it's impressive. And so I think that really resonates with voters. And I think you hit it, on the head of like, I think the biggest challenge for Jolly, and give him some advice, is the ability to, how are you going to articulate that in a way to make a movement? Because right now, a lot of these are window dressing things his campaign's doing. They're rolling out some former Congress people, hitting $1 million mark. Great, right? Your Republican opponent raised 22. Okay, awesome, right? But there's no energy there, right? There's no building of a coalition. There's no building of a actual campaign. I made comments a few weeks ago about, I feel like all these campaigns that are launching are doing so in a soundproof room, right? Like, where is that fight, right? Where is that energy, right? This campaigns are about people, right? It's about ideas, thoughts, values. Like, where is this? And it's hard for David to connect with the values that he's been fighting for most of his life. And that is, a hard thing to do. He's not as skilled as Donald Trump, unfortunately, and he can't do it.
I do want to circle back to your takes on the New York mayor's race, because that is very interesting to me, and we've talked a lot about it. But I want to also, something that we've talked about, Steph, I want to throw to you about education and running on education.
Yeah, I'm just curious to, I feel like there's such a missed opportunity when it comes to education issues, and really most candidates who are running for really, some state house and also the governor's race, and also just nationally, I think education is something that crosses party lines. I've put out some pretty critical, videos or statements about,
I haven't noticed
about the taxpayer-funded voucher program, and I get private emails and texts and support from plenty of Republicans, plenty of independents. It's not, it's not a partisan issue. It's I think it is a broad issue that can bring in a lot of people. And I think, and we kind of talked about this right before the podcast started, it's sometimes public education is a throwaway comment that candidates make, but I feel like there's something there to build on. And, and again, for me, when I think back to 2018, I, like you, was a Gwen Graham voter, then Andrew Gillum voter, and Chris King. And for me, education was a huge, reproductive freedom and health and pro-choice, but also education. Those are really my top two issues. And that's who I'm going to vote for. And I feel like that is just not being, the education piece is just not being really leveraged and used as much as it could be. And I'm curious about your thoughts on that.
You have a lot of thoughts on it. I think it's one of the most unutilized advantages we have as a party. I think for all the reasons you just mentioned. I think at the end of the day, education is such a personal thing, right? It affects not just you individually, but your children if you have them. And I think that is such an important aspect. I often say, as a father myself, one of my important things is to provide them with education, which I know will lead to an opportunity, right? For them to be able to navigate this world. I think the biggest, not to get philosophical, I think the biggest issue I have, one of it with the education system, is we're not really preparing people for the way the world is. Right. There's been in the last few years, and especially in this state, as you know, this kind of blocking off of thought and ideas and expression.
Yep.
Right.
Totally.
Which I'm not going to go down the rabbit hole of how that leads to fascism, but whatever. Right. But that is, I think, something that is a challenge. And so I think a lot of families are navigating this space of, I think there's this dilemma of, what do I do right now that's in my best interest for my child, given this political space, and then try to pull yourself away and be like, this is how I feel like we should be going, right? Yeah. There is this kind of double-edged sword as a parent right now of trying to navigate this space, the people that have means and they don't have means, right? Yep. I think private schools, some of the private schools here, you're actually getting a more forward-thinking and progressive lesson or thought point than some public schools do right now, right? And that's a weird dynamic, because that didn't exist 10 years ago. It was more conservative leaning in private schools, right? And so I would say that I think in a lot of ways that the teachers have been hamstrung, right? the funding has been hamstrung. And for Democrats, to get back to your question, I think we need to start articulating a pathway forward with a vision of what education should be like. Because I think a lot of people, especially millennials, kind of remember growing up and going to school and kind of seeing it decay around them in some aspects, right? Not to sideway and get on to the gun issue, which I think parallels into education. I think just me kind of this slight rambling that I'm on articulates the mass amount of opportunity that
I don't think it's a ramble.
Fighting on education matters, because for me, I always come at this from the voter perspective. You know, Stephanie, that's great. I mean, we might have had this conversation. Stephanie, that's great that you really think about that, but the voters don't care. Right?
Yes, I've been told that multiple times by multiple people.
And so for me, it's like, how are the voters seeing this? Right? Because each of us sees this world slightly different. There might be alignment, but we see it different. And so where is the mass coalition see it? Right? Yeah. But I think the more important about this issue, and maybe my finer point, is, you know, education's polled every cycle, right? And it's up there, it's on the issues, right? But typically the top issues are motivated by environmental things that are going on, or someone's actually pushing it, and that becomes the awareness. Like immigration was always middle of the pack, but with Trump, that became a major issue, right? Because he's beating the drum. And so we're not going to win on this issue, say, in one cycle. It's got to be a multi-cycle issue that we beat the drum on. We get folks like Stephanie and Liz and others to be on these school boards driving that narrative, and then it bubble up on people that are running for bigger offices or in bigger offices talking about how important education is. And also, I think we need to get parents and folks to talk about the impact that their family are having, that storytelling, right? And what that is, and not get boxed in by the other side. I think the reason why we've lost some on the education stuff is we got boxed in to the hyper social issues, right? Can't say gay stuff, which is important, right? The trans issues, right? Things of that nature, and trying to be able to be inclusive, but at the same time talk to the broader audience without using fear tactics, right? And I think that's where, as public official, you probably connect with a lot of people because they're just not in the same ecosphere we are on a daily basis. Like people, believe it or not, are actually living their lives without knowing what's going on around them, right? And so I think that's important. So I think education is a huge opportunity for us as a party. We just don't, use it the way I think we should be using it.
Yeah, I really appreciate that perspective of really just of a parent. And, I think it's also, one of the things that I am proud of in my campaign is I had plenty of private school families who supported me because maybe they made the choice to send their child to a private school, that probably doesn't take vouchers. But but they understood that the choice that they were making for their child right now in this time, what they thought was best for their child, but what they wanted to see and what they hoped for a future was that we have, all of our public schools are strong public schools, and that they are able to, have wide access to books and learning. And there wasn't the feeling that critical thinking was being honestly attacked. And, like I said, all of us have a strong stake in public schools. Like all of us, that's where the majority of our Floridians go. And so it's in all of our best interest to have strong public schools. And I think it's important to bring everyone into that conversation because, again, everyone is impacted by it. And you know what? I've also heard that our private schools, they are feeling, I mean, what we're feeling in public school, they are feeling too in a different level. And they're not subject to sort of the same, the same control, I guess, by the state, but it trickles down to them too. And so it matters to them what's happening in our public schools.
And I'll just do this from a parent's perspective, and this obviously bleeds into, and I've had this conversation. Full transparency, my son goes to a private school, right? And I've had long conversations about what I feel about the public school system. I am 100% firm believer in public school system. I think that is, for the long-term success of our society, that is critical. That is a red line in my opinion, right? But I feel like I have more control with being able to talk to the administrators of a school and understand the curriculum, understand that there's going to be input. I understand exactly what's being taught, and I'm able to either accept it or not, versus a public school system that at any point in a legislative session, it can completely be turned on its head or continue to erode. Mm-hmm. And also, I think teachers are a crucial aspect in education.
Absolutely.
And there are a lot of teachers that are leaving to go do other things because they're underpaid, mm-hmm. they're underappreciated, and they're overworked, right? And
over scrutinized.
And so for me, and I'm just a personal anecdote, it's a very difficult position to be in because I am what is best for my son versus the political reality that I understand this place to be. Mm-hmm. And there are times where I feel like a hypocrite, mm-hmm. right, about it. Right? Like why not just having my son in public school? But for me I've accepted the community he's in. I understand what he's being taught. I know that it's not going to change dramatically. And I've accepted to some level, right? Mm-hmm. Versus the volatile system that is Florida public education system that you well know better than I do, right? But it's been a constant 25, 30-year drumbeat of erosion to what public school is in the state. And there is only a few people that are still on the front lines fighting as hard for the direction we should be going. And that's why I think that Democrats should really pick up the mantle and run, because if we don't, mm-hmm. even the public school that you know of today is not going to be there. There won't even be public school in 10 years at this trajectory at the level that we know, right? Yeah. I mean, you guys are fighting for funding, right? Because, every student you lose, that's less funding you get, which means less teachers, less, investment back into schools. And let's not even get on that track of how much actual money goes into keeping up the current schools you have. That's the other thing about private schools. Listen, I get the argument here, but I can see directly the development investments that are going in that are from private people, right? Investing in schools. I know that they're going to have the latest, greatest things. I don't know if that's going to be the case by the time they get to Boone High School, for example, right? He's 7 years old. I don't know if that's going to be the case. Right. So I know this is a long tangent, but I think that is just how people are processing this because it's very personal to them.
Yeah. And I think we need to be honest about these conversations. Yeah. And, there are absolutely things the public school system can do better. Yeah. And I agree with you. I believe in public-private partnership within our schools. I think it's important. I think there are funding gaps that, as a community, as a local economy, we need to look at and say, it is important that our, public schools have what they need, and we need to invest in them. So I agree. And I think it's important not to gloss over it and say, no, these things aren't real. They're not legitimate. Your concerns don't matter. I think it's important to have the conversations, be transparent about it.
Because I think you lose the fight when you make it public versus private schools, because even people that are in private schools can agree with where you are positioned wise. Mm-hmm. And I just think that there can't be, this is the fight where Republicans want us to have. Right? Of like, you don't have a choice in this situation. Right. Well, no, the choice was made for me 10 years ago when you drastically cut public education. Yeah. You took that choice from me, right? And you put this veil over it as if you're giving me some options where my options are basically already chosen for me, right? Mm-hmm. I come from, place of privilege. I understand that, right? Not a lot of people have that, and that's devastating. And that's why, once again, I do what I do and get amazing people like yourself elected, right? Because I know you're going to be out there fighting for the things that affect people that don't have any options, because regardless of what Republicans are saying, it's bullshit. They made the choice for these people a long time ago. Yeah. And that's just the reality. It is the people that don't have the means and the people that do have the means have different set of options for them. And, I think public education, as it relates to Democrats, this is the opportunity in the lane that we really can drive home.
And I think one thing that almost, I would think everyone can agree on, particularly people who call themselves, fiscal conservatives, can all agree that if a school is getting taxpayer money,
100%,
that should be, how that money's used should be transparent. They should be held accountable, and there should be some guardrails. And I know, one thing that I've been floating for the last year, and I will be pushing this year, is that any private entity that gets public funds for schools should be subject to sunshine laws and open records laws. 100%. We should understand and we should see where that money's going.
And I guarantee you a lot of public schools or private schools at that point will not take the funds.
Well, that tells us something.
You're right. I mean, listen, you're right. I think that is an important, but see, that's a point where people can understand, right? Like if you're getting taxpayer dollars, then there needs to be some accountability to the taxpayer.
Right.
How many times do Republicans get up there and rail about taxpayers and accountability and blah, 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 right? Like all day long, it's nauseating, right? But at the end of the day, when you throw it back out there, oh, well, we got to give parents choices and all these things. Well, now we need to get off the carousel and have a real conversation about these things. And I agree, that's an area where, we don't spend a lot of time, but the broader point is there needs to be a drumbeat on this. We didn't get into this situation overnight. Yep. And unfortunately, we're not going to get out of the situation overnight. There has to be a drumbeat. And I know, and I'll just say this too, I know it's tricky waters for you personally because unfortunately, I'll say it, the quiet part out loud, you have an administration that will remove duly elected people if they disagree hardly with their own political values, right? And I think that's a chilling effect within itself. But at the end of the day, I think we still need to have people that are doing what people elected them to do, which was in your situation, fight for public education. And I think it's important, and I think the party should be taking that up as a core issue of who we are. Yeah.
Well, if Steph gets removed, we're going to get you playing a lot more Switch too. So there's going to be plenty of time for that. Okay, no, I want to bring in, I'm being half joking, but bring in both our threads about authentic candidates and running for education. Here's my pitch. Stephanie Vanos for governor. We're talking about why a candidate, like authenticity matters. Like imagine Steph going in there and being like, I had to work under the threat of being removed, being arrested. I saw what it was like when our public schools were underfunded, when they banned books, and this is why I'm running. Now, again, I'm being slightly facetious, but that conversation, like hearing a candidate like that, and of course, it's Steph, so I'm inherently going to be interested. But hearing a candidate like that, I'm leaning in. I'm like, they have a story to tell. They have a reason they're here. And this is why this matters to them. And compare that to what we heard from David Jolly, nice man. But like at no point am I leaning in, you know? And I think voters feel that. And I think like, Steph, let's keep you on the school board for your full 2 terms. But like, I want to hear that from a candidate. 2
terms. You're running for re-election already? Is that just breaking news right here?
I'll be making a call later today.
Okay.
Can you commit to $1,000?
Yeah.
But like hearing that, hearing that why and understanding why, and I think is important. And whether it's education or whatever, you want to hear that from a candidate. You want to see that like that fire in them. And I will say, like candidly, and I told this to Steph, like, reflecting back, like I think that's one of the things that I felt like was lacking for my candidacy. I ran like kind of post Jan 6 and democracy, which was so important, but I didn't have like that sort of intangible thing that maybe I wish I had, and I love to see in candidates. And it can be hard to find, but that's my pitch.
I'll say this on that point. I just had this conversation with somebody, and one of the misnomers that always get thrown around is like, oh, we don't have a bench. And I'm like, have you seen the school boards? I'm like, the amount of talent right now on the school boards is tremendous. Yeah. From Orange County to Sarasota to Miami-Dade to Broward, like there are some really dynamic school board members that I have no doubt that in 10, 15 years, they will be the leaders of our party. And that's one of the areas where it gives me hope, is because typically the best electeds, but politicians are forged through fire. Yeah. And I don't have to say this. I'm sitting next to someone that lives it day to day, the challenges that you see and the leadership that's coming out of that. That's what gets me excited, right? That's what gets me excited about where we're going as a party, because, there will come a time, you joke, but there will come a time where I will pick up the phone and I will be calling Stephanie to talk about, hey, there might be another opportunity for leadership here. right? And like you said, she's focused right now on doing what people elected her to do, but that is where the future of our party is. And that's what gives me a little glimmer of hope, is the people I see on our school boards, because they got there through fighting for education, fighting for things that matter. And they're very passionate. Like, passion is so underestimated in this space, right? Because it's with passion, it's easy to make that emotional connection. And so, anyway, for what it's worth, I literally had this conversation the other day.
All right. Well, we've been talking about the future of the Democratic Party. I want to kind of close on some national stuff, because I love talking national stuff. You alluded to the mayoral race in New York. I think one of the things that has been, like, Mamdani wins, which was exciting to me. It's not necessarily an endorsement of every bit of policy has, but I appreciate this is a man who seems like he really cares about the city and loves the city, and it's just an exciting Democratic. Well, he ran on a Democratic ticket, but Democratic Socialist. But in any case, I think what was so exciting is to see someone like that win, and then disheartening to see the establishment that is like, was already lining up behind Cuomo loses, and now we're like, finding as many billions of dollars as we can to get behind Eric Adams and help and stop Mamdani from winning in the New York mayor's race. And even seeing Democrats say, members of Congress say, I don't think he really belongs in our party. And that drives me bananas. Like, here we are. We don't have to necessarily agree with everything he believes in, but if we want to be a Big Tent party, then that's going to be more centrist Democrats. Great. Run the way you need to run where you're running. And then people who are on the left, who are like, he obviously won New York. Yeah. So anyway, this is a long way of saying, like, I'm curious your takes on that as someone who thinks a lot about this stuff. And I know you mentioned, let's see, the bigger picture of his success. So let me throw it to you and kind of how you're thinking through it.
Yeah, well, one, I think he had one of the best lines I've heard in a while, where he was on, I think, a late night show, and he said, "Listen, if you support 8 out of 12 issues, then vote for me. If you support me on 12 out of 12 issues, go see a therapist," or something like that, right?
Yeah. Actually, Hope brought that up on our last podcast.
I was like, that is awesome, right? And so I think take a step back from what's going on nationally as the party, and we see it a little bit in Florida, but really as we're talking to a lot of candidates across this country as a firm, there is, in my opinion, a sea change happening, right? A old traditional established guard that is, push is a strong word, but that is getting a lot of energy from people that want to change how we're doing. And I think a lot of that's because we've been losing, right?
Yeah.
Right. And I think I don't necessarily like this analogy, but I'm going to use it because I think people understand it. I think in the Democratic Party in 2024, you're going to see the same type of challenge and energy and sea change that you saw in the Republican Party in 2010, right? With the Tea Party. I think there's a lot of anger.
Yeah.
There are a lot of people that are willing to fight for what they believe in. And there's a lot of people that feel like your time has come and gone, and it's now time for a new generational leadership. And so as a firm, right, as consultants navigating this space, we have always taken the position that we were not run a challenger against an incumbent Democrat. We changed our position this cycle, except for Florida. But we changed our position because I think there are some races and electeds that need to be challenged.
Yeah.
That I agree with them on 8 out of 12 things, but they're not fighting.
Yes.
They're not fighting, and they're not connecting, and they keep trying the same shit that keeps losing. And at some point, you have to have, which I've mentioned several times now, a honest, true conversation. And primaries are a great area to do that. And it leads to the energy. I mean, think of the energy, whether you like it or not, think of the energy that the Republican Party had off of the Tea Party wave. They're still fucking on it. So, sorry, we can cuss here, right? They're still on it. It's still kind of feeling that, right? And then only amplified by what Trump has been able to do. And so I think that race in particular in New York, I think was a example of what is to come. Yeah. And regardless of what you think of his politics, right? Mm-hmm. I think he had energy.
Yep.
He connected with people in a meaningful way, and he was authentic to who he was.
Yeah.
Right. And I think those three things are very dangerous as a political candidate. And he went up against somebody that was established, right? Was part of the old guard.
Yeah.
And he got his butt kicked.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that all the people that are ignoring what happened or making excuses or wanting to attack, I think are missing the larger picture of what's happening across the nation, not just New York City, right? Across the nation. You have a lot of races in this country that are blue or red. We know the outcome of the party, right? Because of how gerrymandered it is. I mean, even now you've got Texas and Trump talking about having a special session to gerrymander Texas even more. Yeah. And of course you had Newsom say, okay, well, hold my beer. We'll do it too. Right. Yeah. And so you have a lot of elements where, okay, well, there's not as many competitive races. So how do we change our party? How do we change our leadership? How do we change our direction? It's through our primaries, right? Because these are safe seats. You have some people that have been there for 30 damn years, man.
Yeah.
And what do they have to show for it? Nothing. I'm not talking about leadership.
Yeah.
I'm talking about rank and file folks that have been in Congress for 20, 30 years. And what have they done?
Yeah.
And I think that's an important question to ask, because and I understand we can't all be, Anna Escamanis and AOCs, right, that are out there fighting, but you've got to be a part of a solution. And when you continue to put forward leadership that just isn't getting it done, there's accountability there.
I mean, I think this Trump 2.0 has really shined this lens on the old guard, if you will, or whatever, about who, to your point, like, who's a fighter, not a fighter? I mean, I think what we are in the midst of just feels so unprecedented. I think we understand that this is what American authoritarianism looks like: defunding of institutions, defunding of or using the DOJ's intimidation tactic, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. What they're doing, and I think when people look at some of these, rank and file representatives who are like, don't really want to fight, I know it makes me mad. It makes me mad as hell. I'm sure it does for you. And I think that this particular moment in time is really showing, like, hey, some of these people are not up to the task. And I think that's why this window is more open than it's ever been for this new guard to come in and challenge.
And I think it's energy, right? Yeah. I think, I talked a lot, like, why did you run for school board, right? Because you were very passionate about education. I mean, even before you ran, you were involved in things that helped push that mission forward. And I think a lot of these folks that are finding themselves being challenged probably started out that way.
Yeah.
But along the way, for whatever reason, they lost their way or just, became comfortable. Well, the time right now demands that we're uncomfortable.
Yeah.
It demands that we ask the hard questions, that we push ourselves as a party. Because I'm not getting any younger. You guys are not getting younger. And
especially me, as the oldest person at this table.
I look the oldest at this point with no hair, so it's okay. But I think that's important. And as parents, like, my child keeps me grounded in that. Yeah. And it brings me back. And I think maybe that's, not to turn this into a therapy session, but I think that's maybe one of the reasons why I think this year I'm just like unfiltered in it, because I feel that there's a lot to be said, that I recognize that we're at a crucial moment, not just for our party, but for our country. And I think that it's time for all of us that are in a position to do something about it, to actually do something about it. Yeah. Right. And what the fuck is everyone waiting for?
Yeah. Right. No, I agree. And I think, though, another part of this that is really never discussed is, when it's time for someone to step down and let someone else who's maybe more energetic, maybe just has that passion. And it's not to say that the people who are stepping down are bad people, or they haven't done anything good, or they haven't contributed, because they have. And like you said, they often start with that passion. But then when it's your time to maybe step down or make room, we need to communicate that, like, we still need you though, because you have experience and you have this wealth of knowledge that is so hard to accrue unless you're actually in it. And so you're still valuable to the party. You're still valuable to the cause, but maybe just in a different way than you were. And I think we don't, I don't think we're good at that. I don't think we're good at making a place for people whose time it is to maybe just move to a different position or to move over, or honestly to candidates who run great races but maybe lose. Like, there's a place for them. And I feel like we sometimes
start a podcast.
Yeah. I'm serious though. I think there's, I don't think we think about that. And again, I just think the experience that you gain from running or serving for some period of time, and again, maybe that's not your place anymore, but that you still have something valuable to contribute, and you're still really important to that.
There's no balance to that conversation. Yeah. Like, what I mean by that is, like, I think institutional memory is critical, right? Mm-hmm. And any organization, movement, process, right? Especially in government, right? Mm-hmm. There needs to be some institutional memory there of how things operate, right? We can't be coming in and reinventing the wheel every 10 years, right? Mm-hmm. You see that in the party too, right? And I think, there needs to be space made for fresh ideas, voices that are tempered a little bit by just understanding and gone through that experience. Mm-hmm. And yes, I love the energy. I love the ideas. How do we do it better? But by the way, here's all the landmines.
Right.
That you're going to step on. And I love that you're going to run through those landmines, but you're still going to get hit.
Yeah.
Versus maybe this is a better approach, but still have that energy. But what I mean by balance is we can't have that conversation. It is them versus us, right? And that's where it is. The pendulum kind of swings on that, right? And we're experiencing that in our party right now. And I think, unfortunately, this pendulum is going to swing extremely to the other side of, like, to hell with all of you. Mm-hmm. You're part of the problem, versus that tempered approach of having that balanced conversation. Mm-hmm. Ideally, I would love that, but I know that's not where we're headed. So.
Well, I continue to be the optimist.
Yeah, no, I hear that.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the pod. We appreciate you taking the time and fitting us into your schedule, and thank you for the bottle of wine.
Absolutely.
It was actually for me, but
yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay.
She's claimed it. Put it, mark it down. No, but I enjoyed it. And I love the pod. Like I said earlier, I think you're having some really amazing conversations.
Oh, thank you.
And I think it's important. And I think it's important to, invite folks. You should invite David. You should invite people that disagree with me. I'm okay with that. Listen, I know I don't own it all and know it all. Some people are going to be upset with the comments I made that day, and I'm okay with that. But that's part of the conversation. And I think y'all are providing a space, especially in Florida politics, that I think is critical, that needs to be had. I just hope I didn't interrupt this line of generational talent that you had on the show.
You are in it. You are part of it. You are part of the generational talent. So thank you.
Final question. Do you want to sponsor the pod?
Sure.
All right. You heard it, folks.
You guys are now monetized.
Thank you so much. It's great having you.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you all.